Casting away. We cast into the depths of the sea our sins and failures and regrets. Reflections of our imperfect selves float away. What can we bear? With what can we bear to part? We upturn the darkness, bring what is buried to light. What hurts still lodge? What wounds have yet to heal? We empty our hands, release the remnants of shame, let go fear and despair that have dug their home in us. Open hands, opening heart. The year flows out, the year flows in.
It is the day itself that is making us sit here and talk about the peculiar incident 6 months ago when you lied and I blustered and you accused me of insincerity and I made you cry. An incident that neither of us can quite forget, but that we can't quite mention either, and which has been slowly corroding the trust and love we once had for each other. It is the day that has given us the opportunity, indeed the responsibility, to stop talking of our usual business and to reopen a case we pretended to have put out of our minds.
There is peace between nations and peace between people. There is peace in the world around us and peace in the stillness of our private selves. The reflection, forgiveness, quiet, and contemplation of Yom Kippur create the setting for peace to find roots. But it cannot happen without our consent. It is our will to be willing, our openness to be open, that are the first steps to finding peace in our hearts and with others.
the invitation. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing.
It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes.
It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments.
Blessed are you, world. In the archives of Kibbutz Beit Hashita, I discovered forgotten handwritten notes from a Passover Seder from 1927. Instead of the Kiddush, the author wrote, "Blessed are you, Kibbutz." In his footsteps, I widen the blessing circle, and say, "Blessed are you, world," to praise your fragile, complex beauty. If you call the earth your mother who birthed you in pain, from the wombs of the mothers from Eve until now, if you call the world your friend who upholds you whether in a day of trouble or of joy, if you call the universe your helpmeet who gives strength to both your weakness and your might, then join with me in these songs, and together we'll sing in a world that fills our springs with blessings. Planet orbiting the sun from time's beginning till its end, planet blue, green, and white, planet covered with water and land and sky, planet made of forests, lakes and seas, fields and sandy beaches, planet that we have seen from space, complete and alive before our astonished eyes. Like the enthusiastic kibbutznik who insisted on making his time new, let us make new what's old and make holy what's new, and join what's called secular to what's called holy, and what's called material to what's called spiritual, until the gulf between them disappears. From Einstein and his students, I learned that the elements in me were forged from the same furnace as the stars. From other great ones, I've learned to sit, breathe, pay attention with watchful eyes to a world filled with glory and wonders like me, like you, and like the stars. O blessed world, you give us each day visions and problems to solve and to praise. Baruch atah olam shenoten lanu bechol yom dumuyot uva'ayot liftor uleshabeach.
Learning peace. Rabbi Tarfon and the elders were reclining in the loft of a house in Lod when this question was asked of one of them: is study greater or is action greater? Rabbi Tarfon answered and said, action is greater. Rabbi Akiva answered and said, study is greater. Everyone answered and said, study is greater, for study leads to action.
Not by might and not by power, but by human knowledge. Learning can be a path to peace. Understanding can only happen through listening, shared experience, and mutual insight. The Hebrew prophets imagine that when peace arrives, they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they study war anymore. If we can stop studying war and death, we can then study how to live a good life. We learn from our people and from all peoples how to live better.
Please rise as we learn from the wisdom of our people. Thank you. Please be seated. Is the internet good or bad? Last night, and over again, we have seen how the internet can help disconnected people find common cause in anger and alienation. Yet the internet can also be an opportunity for people of goodwill to find each other, family and friends to stay connected, organizations to share what they are doing, and to foster community. And the internet can be a route to dialogue and to freedom. Shulam Dean was raised as an ultra-Orthodox Jew. He dutifully married an ultra-Orthodox woman and began producing children to be raised in ultra-Orthodoxy. But Dean himself was always curious about the outside world. First, he bought a car for practical purposes, but it came with a radio that let him listen to all kinds of people. Then he found his way to a library, and starting with the Children's Encyclopedia, he began to read about the world and science and history and other cultures. Each of these gradual steps was not anti-religious. He was not recruited by secular humangelicals. But looking back, after he wrote his memoir, All Who Go Do Not Return, each step turned out to be one more step on a path to intellectual freedom. Most of us have always known the freedom to experience other cultures, to meet Jews and others of differing religious opinions. We may find these stories of exiters from Jewish orthodoxy or other religious communities that are rigid to be quaint, foreign, exotic. These are stories of self-emancipation, and also stories of a Judaism closed to the outside world and fearful of the present and future. If last night our Torah reading from Deuteronomy dramatized the risks of insularity, our Jewish literature reading this morning celebrates the power of learning, the freedom to be open to new experiences, the possibilities of our interconnected 21st century. From Shulam Dean's All Who Go Do Not Return. The radio and books and newspapers were just the beginning. At the home of a friend who owned a computer, I found myself browsing through a computer mail order catalog and discovered a sudden urge to buy a computer myself. I was still working with students at the time and thought that I could use it to create educational worksheets using word processing and desktop publishing software. Several weeks later, I placed the order, and the computer arrived several days later in a great big box. Gitty and the girls stood in the doorway of the dining room as I set it all up on a small desk in the corner. In the package of bundled software was a 3.5-inch floppy disk with a label, America Online, 30-day free trial. "What's that?" Gitty asked. I was as clueless as she was, but the instructions said to connect a cord to the phone line and install the software. Curious, I did as instructed, and the four of us listened to the wheezy, whiny tones of the dial-up modem. "Welcome," a female voice announced. "You've got mail," said a male voice. Colorful icons and graphics appeared on the screen, a dizzying array of links, each of which opened up a whole new world. News, shopping, chat rooms. It was all so bright and inviting, I could only marvel at the world that was opened up before me. "Look at this," I called to Gitty a few days later. "I'm having a conversation." Gitty came and glanced at the screen. "Watch," I said. I type something, and then this guy types something, and then I type something, and so on, and it shows up instantly. I couldn't contain my excitement, but Gitty looked confused. "So it's like a phone, except you type instead of speak?" she asked. Like a phone? For a second I wondered, was that all it was? But of course it wasn't. This is a stranger, a random person. Why would you want to speak to a random person? There was no way that Gitty would understand. She did not share my curiosity, did not care to learn about the world the way I did. All of a sudden, I was connected to millions with whom I could interact, and soon I discovered a world of people entirely different from anyone I knew. I encountered Jews who ate pork and drove on the Sabbath, Christians who did not appear to be anti-Semitic, Muslims who were not terrorists. One conversation stood out for me. A Jewish man living somewhere in the Midwest, whom I encountered in AOL's Jewish community chat room, shared with me his passion for Jewish learning. He told me of his regular study sessions in Talmud and Maimonides with his local conservative rabbi. He was not Orthodox. He kept the Sabbath sometimes, he said, when he was able, although to him, keeping the Sabbath meant not so much living by the rules, but something about reflection and refraining from creative activity. Sometimes the man kept kosher, but often did not. His comments were infuriating to me. "You're not making any sense," I typed furiously. "If the rules were not fixed, then what determined our obligations? Do you just pick and choose the things you like? That's not Judaism." "Perhaps not to you," he said, "but there are other ways to look at it." I could not understand it. Here was a man who shattered the narrative I had been given. I knew that non-Orthodox Jews existed, but I had assumed that they were unlearned, and so they didn't know any better. If only they studied the Talmud and Maimonides and all the other great works of the great Torah sages, they would see that there was only one way to live a Jewish life. Here, however, was a man who studied it all, yet his practice was so different. "How can you study the Talmud and not keep Shabbos?" I asked him. "How can you eat treif if you know it's forbidden?" The man was patient. There is more than one way to live a Jewish life. I do not think of the Torah as the literal word of God, but only as a man-made document of divine inspiration. Maybe Gitty was right, I thought. Speaking to people outside our world made me think too much, and as we all knew, too much thinking led to problems. Yet I could not resist. Every night for hours, I would log on to America Online and strike up conversations with people from outside our world, always wanting to prove to them that their way of life was wrong, but also madly curious about their views and the worlds that they lived in. Please rise as we return our Torah scroll to the Ark.
Working for peace, person wanted. Wanted, a person who can be truthful among liars, be unwilling to sell his fellow human for any price, honor or fame, and be unable to ignore injustice or brutality, even though it be to her advantage. The blood of the times must course through his words and for his ideas. Be prepared to enter prison. She must take the part of the injured without seeking applause. Be able to think intimately and speak from the heart. He must extend a brotherly hand and act better than he speaks. And she must not condemn another and remain blind to her own faults. She should be the artist of the deed, the greatest of all arts. He must raise the value of humanity, starting with himself. Wages will be small, the work steady.
Pursuing peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is conflict resolution. As long as we have individual minds and opinions, there will always be disagreements, arguments, anger, and conflict. Thus it has always been, and thus shall it ever be. What makes the difference between peace and war is whether conflict is an opportunity for escalation or reconciliation. Yom Kippur reminds us that peace is never guaranteed. As Hillel said, be like the students of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace.
For words of hurt, for kind words not said, for pettiness and hasty judgment, let us be forgiving. For impatience and arrogance, for disrespect and hypocrisy, let us be forgiving. For self-absorption and lack of compassion, for remaining silent when our voices might have made a difference, let us be forgiving. For withholding our love from those who depend on us, for not rising to fulfill the best that is in us, let us be forgiving.
Being silent with ourselves can be a challenge at times. But it is also an important part of creating space to reflect, creating the emotional permission to think of our year just gone, to understand what we did that was less than perfect, and to strive to do better in the year just begun. And so I invite us to take a moment for silent reflection in the beginning of a new year and the end of an old. And now our service continues on page 10.
Healing peace. Windows invite us to see the world outside ourselves, but not all seeing is the same. There is seeing with the eyes, and there is seeing with the mind. Aha, I see, we say when we have an insight. We look back in hindsight, plan ahead with foresight, keep things in order with oversight. When we miss a step, we call that oversight too.
And there is a kind of seeing that we might call undersight, seeing under, beneath the surfaces, seeing into, through and through, taking in the whole of what is. We might also call this heart sight, seeing with the heart, because seeing deeply renders us more understanding and compassionate. Is it not easier to forgive when one sees beyond the actions, sees through to the humanity in all its flaws and limitations of someone who has caused us pain?
Let me be self-approved. Let me be self-approved. Once I looked for God's approval and served God with abject favor. Now I only look for self-approval, for I have learned that God's approval would no way help me if I did not approve myself.
I wished for the approval of men and bowed to the meanness of men to get it. I wished for the approval of my estate and accepted its income to get it. I wished for the approval of the suit I wore and of the food I ate and dressed myself fool and ate myself hog to get it. I wished for the approval of the scholars and rehearsed in dead cultures to get it. I wished for the approval of the soldiers and murdered my brothers to get it. I wished for the approval of the statesmen and lied in the word of the law to get it.
And so I left myself behind and traveled everywhere asking for my discarded consort. And that is why men gazed at me and asked me what I was looking for, and I never could tell them. And that is why I put the universe into a scale and found it short weight and charged up a bill against it. All around me were men and women restless with resentments toward life. Men and women who had deferred themselves to something not themselves and gone short in the investment. Men and women who believed they could put themselves in pawn and redeem themselves at will. The dear men and women nearest to me and farthest from me, who took their heritage at the full and left it empty.
The root of the tree was self-approved. Then came the tree. The dream of the picture was self-approved. Then came the picture. The four notes of the song were self-approved. Then came the song. The instinct of the good deed was self-approved. Then came the good deed. Let me be self-approved.
Once I prayed to God for myself and went hungry and thirsty with a full meal. Now I pray to myself for God, and though my lips receive neither food nor drink, I am fed on richest returns.
Jacob had spent more waking hours in his kitchen than in any other room. No baby knows when the nipple is pulled from his mouth for the last time. No child knows when he last calls his mother Mama. No small boy knows when the book has closed on the last bedtime story that will ever be read to him. No boy knows when the water drains from the last bath he will ever take with his brother. No mother knows she is hearing the word Mama for the last time. No father knows when the book is closed on the last bedtime story he will ever read. From that day on and for many years to come, peace reigned on the island of Ithaca, and the gods looked favorably upon Odysseus, his wife, and his son. Jacob knew that whatever happened, he would see the kitchen again, and yet his eyes became sponges for the details: the burnished handle of the snack drawer, the seam where the slabs of soapstone met, the special award for bravery sticker on the underside of the island's overhang, given to his son Max for what no one knew was his last pulled tooth, a sticker their dog Argus saw many times every day, and only Argus ever saw, because Jacob knew he would one day wring them out for the last drops of these moments. They would come as tears. For the last time. How do you know when it's the last time? The last time to ask, how are you? How was your day? The last time to say, I love you. Good night. Sweet dreams. You don't. And so you must reach out with love and compassion at every opportunity to show those who love you that you care, you love, and need to be needed. In a world where you suddenly find yourself alone once again in an achingly painful way because someone you love has left you behind to seek your own paths and truths in an uncertain place, the only thing certain is that you're not truly alone because of those who do love you, and for that be thankful and grateful and feel blessed that you were able to say, good night, I love you, one last time. If you're comfortable standing, I invite you to stand for a moment at this time. We do not know what losses await us in the year just begun, and so it is important that we offer messages of love and care for those who are in our lives today, not just those who have gone. Yet we reflect back on the power of love, on the reality of loss, and we think of all those people whose lives gave us life and whose love taught us how to love. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute in their memories and in memory of all of our loved ones. In Jewish life, we say, Zecher Tzadikim Livracha, the memory of good people is a blessing to us. Please be seated as these words are sung. In Philadelphia, if you wait in a long line, you can get up close and personal with the Liberty Bell. When the Pennsylvania State House bought the bell in 1753, they inscribed on it a quote from Leviticus 25, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." By all the inhabitants, they probably did not mean women or Native Americans or slaves. It would actually be another 27 years before Pennsylvania passed a gradual abolition that stopped making new slaves but kept current slaves in bondage until freed by their owners or their death. Right next to the Liberty Bell is a relatively new exhibit called the President's House, which highlights the slaves that George Washington brought with him during his first term in office. The Liberty Bell itself was mostly obscure until the 1830s, when abolitionists claimed it as a symbol of their cause, and it became still more popular over the decades as a symbol of American freedom. The inscription even makes an appearance in the 1956 epic film, The Ten Commandments. At the very end of 220 minutes, Moses tells Joshua to enter the promised land and, quote, "proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof." If you recall what we read from Deuteronomy last night, the Torah's Moses had a very different message for the land's inhabitants: segregation, destruction, religious persecution. People talk a lot about freedom, from the Bible then to the Bible Belt today. But liberty for whom? And liberty to do what? We see a world in crisis, and we want to find common cause with those who share our values. Freedom sounds like a good place to start. Freedom to run our own lives, freedom to make our own choices, freedom to live our own truths. The devil is in the details, and what one person means by freedom is very different from another. In a civilized society, there must be limits to freedom. Remember, your freedom ends when your fist hits my nose. Rabbinic literature makes a similar point, where the Torah describes the Ten Commandments as carved, charut, into the tablets. A creative commentator quips, Al tikra charut ele cherut. Do not read carved, but rather cherut, freedom. Freedom in an ordered society. Freedom with no rules would be anarchy, rule of the strongest, nasty, brutish, and short. On the other hand, too many rules that we have no right to author or to amend would not be freedom either. Maybe freedom itself is an illusion. In our basic human nature, are we really free? The more we learn about genetics, the less it seems we actually make our own choices. Sometimes identical twins who were separated at birth like the same breakfast cereal, choose the same professions, even marry partners with the same name. Long before we have any choice, we are conditioned by our upbringing to see race, to speak a language, to understand history and our place in it in a certain way. We are trained to see the world through a particular frame of religion, gender, culture, economics, and ideology from age 0. And group identity reinforces what we already believe, to the degree that changing our mind feels like changing who we are. How free can we really be? On the other hand, are we really not free? Compared to earlier generations, our liberties are revolutionary. We marry for love, not family duty. We choose our professions, our leisure activities, where we live, with legal protection against discrimination. We can speak and assemble and petition and protest and post on social media. A humanistic Jewish congregation like ours is only possible in a time and a place of intellectual and personal freedom. On the philosophical level, we live our lives and we treat others with an assumption of free will. I make choices, you make choices, we debate our choices, maybe we change our minds. One of my humanistic rabbinic colleagues was once asked why he persisted in believing in free will. He replied, I have no choice. The very basis of Yom Kippur assumes the reality of freedom. Why ask for forgiveness if you had no choice about what you did? Why offer forgiveness when regret is an illusion, since the regret itself was pre-programmed? If we are free to choose in a philosophical or a moral sense, then we want that freedom, that personal autonomy reflected in law, in politics, in society. In real life, there is potential freedom, and then there is actual freedom. Freedom to work in our chosen profession, freedom to live where we want, sure, if you can afford it. Equal opportunity sometimes has an admission charge. I recently read that my alma mater, Yale University, in 2014, paid $500 million to manage its investments, 3 times what it spent on financial aid. And Harvard has more students from families earning over $500,000 than from those earning under $40,000. As for laws against discrimination, they do not instantly change hearts and minds. There are plenty of laws against discrimination in home buying and selling. Yet we see case after case of home appraisals going up hundreds of thousands of dollars when black homeowners hide their pictures and have a white friend show the house to the realtor evaluating it. Even when Roe versus Wade was technically legalized and it legalized abortion everywhere. Several states chipped away at that freedom here and there, undermining it by 1,000 cuts before the national right was taken away. A national right to same-sex marriage equality, which affirmed our religious right to celebrate such partnerships, has not stopped opponents from claiming that their religious freedom to discriminate needs to be preserved. Is a high school football coach's freedom to pray publicly and to invite players to pray with them more important than the student's freedom to not be coerced or cajoled into praying? When we say freedom of religion or freedom of conscience, we may mean very different things. Part of our crisis is a feeling that our freedoms are being taken away. Ironically, both the right and the left are worried about the loss of freedom. If someone said to you tomorrow, "My body, my choice," what do you think they mean? Are they pro-choice or anti-COVID vaccine? Is the most important amendment freedom of speech and religion, or the right to bear arms to preserve life? What does freedom of speech mean in an era of social media, microaggressions, calling out and calling in and calling names? If you are legally free to do something that produces overwhelming social condemnation, are you really free to do it? Of course, there are degrees of freedom. If you read memoirs of people who have left ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities, like Shulam Dean, as we saw, these communities have many, many problems. A lack of general education, dramatized in recent news reports, limitations on women and their possibilities, contempt and fear of the outside world, omnipresent surveillance of one's ritual practices and inner beliefs. In the other direction, some secularized Jews are tempted to join these communities despite the cost to their individuality. They hope it will help them manage the almost infinite freedoms of modernity. When I meet with wedding couples, I outline their options: breaking one glass or each partner breaking a glass, choosing their own ketubah marriage agreement text, choices from preset texts for readings and vows and exchanging rings, or, of course, writing something original for any of these elements. Some couples look at me in a mild panic, and I remind them that this is the downside of freedom: so many choices. For those who do leave Orthodoxy or other rigid religious communities, their freedom, however costly, is worth it. In the movie Inherit the Wind, about teaching evolution in a fundamentalist community, one character describes the temptation of conformity at the price of freedom. It's the loneliest feeling in the world. It's like walking down an empty street listening to your own footsteps. But all you have to do is knock on any door and say, "If you let me in, I'll live the way you want me to live and think the way you want me to think." And all the blinds will go up and all the doors will open, and you'll never be lonely ever again. Even the exiters recall, for all the benefits of their new and hard-won freedom, the warmth of that ideological community as long as you agree to their rules. That traditional, rigid world is a world of conformity, a world of heresy and blasphemy and intellectual inquisition. It's telling teachers in Florida elementary schools to avoid all LGBT topics, lest a parent's religious sensibilities be offended. Or the University of Idaho recently suggesting its faculty avoid discussing abortion, lest they be non-neutral and run afoul of state prohibitions on recommending the procedure. Yet accusing others of heresy and blasphemy is an equal opportunity temptation for both right and left. Have you ever been tempted to offer a thought on social media that diverges from the political consensus of your circles, and then you delete it because you just do not want to deal with the arguments? You can legally say what you want, short of provoking violence, but there will be social consequences for what is deemed offensive. And the standards for what is acceptable evolve, sometimes very rapidly. Watch a favorite TV show or movie from 30 years ago and marvel at how rapidly things have changed. Some lament this evolution as the end of humor or unfair retroactive judgment. Others see increased sensitivity to what might be offensive as kindness and respect, empathy for human experiences beyond one's own. Is speech itself a kind of violence and therefore subject to restriction? Your freedom ends where your words hit my ears. Or is speech related to thought, which should be free of coercion? This is the challenge of freedom. What should the rules be? Who should enforce them? Government? Social judgment? Ostracism? What goes beyond hurtful to full-on hate speech, and what should the consequences be? Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib recently declared that, quote, "Among progressives, it has become clear that you cannot claim to hold progressive values yet back Israel's apartheid government." Fellow Democratic Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz responded, quote, "The outrageous progressive litmus test on Israel by Rashida Tlaib is nothing short of anti-Semitic. Proud progressives do support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. Suggesting otherwise is shameful and dangerous. Divisive rhetoric does not lead to peace." Tlaib here is the progressive inquisition rooting out heresy. Wasserman Schultz answers with an accusation of blasphemy, the A word, without a scarlet letter. Both Wasserman Schultz and Tlaib might agree on teaching American history, maybe even Israeli-Palestinian history, while admitting bias and structural inequality and historical racism. But the power of sectarianism, of accusing of blasphemy and heresy, is very strong. It is said that academic politics are so vicious because the stakes are so low. But it's also a question of red lines. For some, an anti-abortion Democrat is a heretic to be excommunicated, while an anti-Israel progressive is a hero, or vice versa. Same with anti-Trump Republicans like Illinois' Adam Kinzinger, or scholars of U.S. history who dare to challenge the sacred cows of American exceptionalism. These all may be secular subjects, but religious-style reactions are part of our basic wiring. Today is Yom Kippur, a day that celebrates the power of speech and the importance of taking correction. The power of speech is reflected in the tradition of observing the holiest day in the Jewish calendar by reciting a 300-page book out loud in unison. We have chosen to change that tradition to make our services more relevant, interesting, and under 90 minutes. The power of speech is also reflected in the importance of apologies and forgiveness. Apologies and forgiveness may be accompanied by actions, and they are more believable when accompanied by actions. In their essence, though, they are speech. I was wrong. I forgive you. 2 millennia after the Jerusalem temple's atonement through animal sacrifice ended, this day is dedicated to accepting responsibility for what we have done. Sometimes we only know that we've done something wrong if someone tells us. Our freedom is not infringed if we learn what upset someone else, or if we can do differently in the future. It is more effective to receive a private message of correction, calling someone in by assuming their willingness to listen, rather than calling them out and assuming their moral failure. Public correction is often shaming. Private correction is more likely helping. Yet our stance receiving this correction is also important. This, too, is a relationship like those discussed last night. Accepting correction, admitting we were wrong, asking for forgiveness is limiting our freedom for the good of community. Community with family, with friends, and with each other. The crisis we face today is a breakdown of community. Therefore, restoring this community, restoring our secular faith in humanity, living our best lives with courage and integrity and joy, demands the strength to accept correction and to do better next time. We turn a new page in the book of our life, one that we are free to write with our deeds and our words. We can write what we will, but accepting a few edits is important too. Shana Tova, may we all write well and then still better. One last time, wish those near you a Shana Tova, a Happy New Year.